So, dear colleagues, dear partners and members of ENA, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you to this year's Energy Dialogue, which once again is taking place in Thessaloniki, a town known for its deep historic roots and its unique location in the Thermaic Gulf by the sea. May I remind you that the last time that the Energy Dialogue was organized was in June 2018 in the equally beautiful city of Belgrade. Then, in June 2019, we had a most informative energy transition event in Vienna. Some of you were there. And then the two unfortunate years of the pandemic followed. In between 2019 and now, we had some major developments in the Institute, as we managed to expand the partnership base of the Institute by including all 13 countries of the so-called core area, with at least one partner in each country. The Institute is now in a much better position to address the challenges which lie ahead and to tackle all the different energy issues faced in the region. So, ENA has now partners in 13 countries, including Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania, Turkey, Israel, Cyprus, and Greece. Branching out to Austria, Slovenia, Hungary, and Egypt is in our immediate plans. Okay. Today, we are back with the 13th edition of this major regional energy event, which right from the start in 2007, here in Thessaloniki, it was conceived as a unique gathering spanning the entire energy spectrum, a gathering of interested energy professionals and company executives willing to commit their efforts in strengthening cooperation between different countries in the region, improve understanding, and foster closer energy links by overcoming year-old problems, historic differences, and social antipathies. The question is, have we succeeded in this ambitious goal? Yes and no. In a practical sense, and as far as energy matters are concerned, we have indeed managed to bring round the same table almost all countries in the region. In a political sense, maybe we have not managed as much. Also because politicians, although they could, they choose not to get involved in forums like ours. But when they do, they get astonished on how effective the regional network that we have established, all of us we have established over the years can be. So let us hope that for the good and the prosperity of the region, politicians can take advantage of the excellent working relations that have been established over the years through our institute and this forum in particular. We are gathered here today, many colleagues, associates, and friends, some of us going back many years, as we are brought together by a common vision and aspiration. We believe that through our cooperation and mutual understanding, we can overcome political and cultural differences and work for the benefit of the people in our different countries. For energy in its various facets, this has proved to be the case, and we can attest to that through our relevant experiences. An important facilitator and cohesive force in regional collaboration. This is what energy is about. Indeed, today we have many important projects of truly regional importance which were not here 15 years ago when we first started this series of meetings, which proves the ability for countries and governments, when there is a need, to overcome differences and work together. Just mentioning few of these projects is of interest. Greek-Turkish gas interconnector, completed in 2009. TANAP-TAP system, few years later. Interconnector Greece-Bulgaria, which we will hear later, has just been completed, will come on stream early July. Several cross-border electricity connections, and some of them major and subsea, Montenegro, Italy. A number of new LNG plants, mostly FSRUs, which helped improve gas supply in the region. New underground gas storage facility, not enough, but there we have some. A major nuclear power plant in Akuyu in Turkey. Huge rise in renewable energy sources plant capacity, mostly wind and buildings. I mean, 15 years ago, it was unheard of that we're talking in terms of gigawatts. All this happened over the last 15 years. Large-scale introduction of energy efficiency, especially in buildings. At that time, there were just very few scattered examples. Now we're talking about blocks and blocks and blocks, building blocks in towns and suburbia. New electricity and gas market structure, referring especially to the European target model, gas hubs, and market coupling. In the course of the last 15 years, a lot has changed in terms of energy market structure and operation. Market liberalization, let us remember, was once an elusive dream and is now considered normality, with electricity and gas market competition well established at retail level in most countries, not in all countries, but in several countries. And for the rest is a question of time, few years. And although admirable progress has been achieved in year-long problems related to market operation, now, as a result of the brewing crisis over the last 12 months, priorities have changed once again. Following speedy recovery from the coronavirus pandemic and global energy demand recovery, energy markets, long before the war in Ukraine, had started to upend, upside down. This had become particularly obvious in the case of Europe since summer last year. Today, global energy markets are on the edge, with mounting supply problems in oil, gas, and electricity. Prices appear to be spiraling out of control. Europe, energy-wise, is in a truly perilous situation, far worse than other parts of the world. Energy security has returned as number one priority in energy policy, as governments are obviously concerned with the very real possibility that uninterrupted energy flows can no longer be taken for granted. The question naturally arises if we can afford to guarantee continuous energy provision while at the same time pursuing unsustainable and expensive green policies. These are no doubt hard choices and present major challenges, which will be hotly debated in the sessions which will follow in this energy dialogue. Summing up, let me reiterate that there is not the slightest doubt in my mind, and I believe this thought is shared by many of you, colleagues and partners of IENE, that there is still an important role that energy could play in fostering cooperation and friendship among the different countries in the region, no matter what and which type and from where these differences arise. Energy, in all its forms, could indeed emerge in the years ahead as a key area of cooperation, incorporating common planning and strategic actions. The social and financial benefits to all from such an approach could be enormous, but most important of all could be the ensuing peace dividend that such cooperation could bring. So, this is the third time that we carried out as an institute this major study, the Southeast Europe Energy Outlook, and the idea is to provide a compendium, a kind of atlas of what's happening in energy in the region. The best way to navigate through this is to go through the various chapters, and you see, apart from the introductory chapters, which include social, economic, political environment, we have the economic review in the various countries and in the region, and then we go into sectorial analysis, such as oil, gas, electricity, renewables, energy efficiency, and then we end up with some estimates in terms of investments and also some demand projections. Obviously, this is a huge study, something like 1,400 pages, very densely written, is more of a reference volume than something that you are supposed to read through. Important to mention is the division between the core countries and the peripheral countries. The core countries are the blue ones. We have added 2 new countries in comparison to the outlook which we did in 2017. That is Hungary and Israel. Hungary because it has emerged as a very important hub, regional hub for electricity. Israel because it has become, it has started influencing gas flows into the region. And there are news about export deals and all that through gas which Israel is exporting to Egypt and all that. The amount of energy used in the region as compared to what is being consumed all over Europe, EU27, is not insignificant. It averages about 20%, as you'll see here, fuel consumption, gas, electricity, they vary in a very small band wave between 21.4% and 20% and 21.6% of the total. So 20% of the total EU energy is consumed in the region. So the region is not just a poor and struggling region, is a region which has very important energy consumption, and as such, it has to take care of its own resources, cooperation between the countries, being able to supplement energy, and so forth. So the interaction of the energy economies of the region is becoming even more important in that sense. And here we have the various energy mixes, and we also put the differentiation between with Turkey and without Turkey. Here we have with Turkey, because if you put Turkey on the one side and all the other countries on the other side, it's 50-50. So it's a very important factor. But we have chosen to include in most of our comparisons and estimates, including Turkey. So we have a very real picture of what energy is about in the region. The important thing is that the energy mix is not changing that dramatically from year to year, or even from 5 years to 5 years, 10 years to 10 years. There are small changes. So we're saying that because there's a big program, a big effort to decarbonize and so forth. Yes, you decarbonize, but you increase gas. You increase gas, yes, but you need to be able to accommodate renewables, and therefore you use more gas. So the energy mix is not changing. The important thing to remember is not changing that fast. The electricity mix, on the other hand, is changing a lot faster. It's more effective. But electricity is only part of the overall energy picture. And you can see here what you see that between over the 10 years, 2009, 2019, yes, there are very discernible changes in terms of the electricity mix. So the electricity mix, the changes are more pronounced and can affect more directly attitudes and the consumption patterns. The region is has various degrees in terms of installed capacity. They depend obviously on consumption, demand, and demographics. So you see Turkey here is far ahead than all other countries, with Romania following, Greece, Bulgaria, and Croatia, and then the other countries. So we see big differentiations in terms of installed capacity. So it's very important to have this in mind. And this is all forms of energy, thermal, renewables, hydro. Key regional issues. What are the key regional issues? The marked divergence between EU and EU policies, pursued policies, and Southeast Europe strategies and applied policies in the region. There is a divide in terms of decarbonization. Some countries are resisting, and they have a reason to do that because lignite and coal provides them security of supply. So it's very difficult for a government to take a decision to decarbonize without an alternative, without a fallback position. So this is something which is becoming an issue. Southeast Europe is definitely more energy security vulnerable than the rest of Europe. High hydrocarbon dependence, electricity's newcomer gas is upsetting things. That is, it alters the supply balance, and in that sense, it is impacting the rest of the energy mix. In many cases, we have a lack of adequate electricity and gas interconnections. Coal and lignite is and will continue for some time to be relevant in the region, regardless of aggressive decarbonization plans and so forth. And now, because of the crisis, we've seen a return to free as you like consumption of coal. So the message that the European Commission has sent to countries is, in order to avoid blackouts and so forth, you're allowed to use as much coal as you feel necessary. Greek government has made a U-turn and says, I'm going to double coal production in the next few months, and so forth. Now, it's not that easy, but this is what is being pursued right now. It's a U-turn to try to increase local production and consumption of coal. Therefore, Southeast Europe's path towards decarbonization is going to be difficult and uncertain. Nuclear remains a viable option for Southeast power generation, and we've seen this clearly in Bulgaria, in Romania, in Croatia, in Hungary, and now we will have Turkey joining the club. And renewables growth, impeded due to repeated policy failures and electricity grid constraints. Now, certain of these constraints have been lifted, but yet again, not all the factors, the surrounding environment, the economic environment is not helping to propel them at such sort of strength as some of the policy makers would like. So developing further RES is a big challenge because we will need more storage, and you need storage, both hydroelectric and electricity storage, which is not there yet. And the more RES you put in your system doesn't mean that it can deliver equivalent amount of energy because of grid constraints. So we have the RES going hand in hand with electricity grid priorities. Energy security is coming back in force, which is a complex issue, but many people do not understand this. And here we have an utter confusion in the various upper echelons of strategies in EU and elsewhere. Yes, they admit that gas is necessary, oil is necessary, yes, but this is not helping us with green policies, and green policies have a priority. And the question is, do we want electricity and gas now to survive to the next day? Or are we prepared not to have electricity and gas because we think that in 30 or 50 years the planet and the biosphere will collapse? Question. This is something that we're going to debate. Hence, there is a need to strengthen the available mechanisms, and we see this very clearly in our region, strengthening the emergency and solidarity mechanism. We see this operating very successfully between Greece and Bulgaria. Other countries are joining in. There are some very imaginary plans about common gas supply and all that through platforms. They are beginning to find the solidarity in a European sense. But here in the region, we are actually doing this on a daily basis. So the region has some lessons to teach to the rest of Europe as far as the emergency and solidarity mechanism. We're applying this here very successfully. And we see the cooperation between Greece and Turkey in this respect to be equally important and successful to a certain extent, because we have 3 pipelines bringing gas from Russia and from Azerbaijan and from Turkey, all originating in Turkey to Greece. And there is a lot of cooperation also in the oil products field. Greece exports a lot of oil products to Turkey and so forth. So we see that there is a lot of energy trade between Greece and Turkey. And this is not insignificant. One has to take this into account when we're talking about emergency and solidarity mechanisms. Turkey, for example, has 4 LNG plants. Now they're having the 5th one. We are building our 2nd and 3rd one will follow. So Greece and Turkey, in between them, in 2 years, they're going to have about 7 or 8 LNG plants. Now this is important for the rest of the region. Of course, we have a new plant in Croatia, and we'll talk about this later. And the balance, the energy mix, to have this is an observation which comes out of considering all the aspects that we have examined, that if you have a balanced energy mix, this is your best security policy in terms of energy security. So striving towards a balanced energy mix, this is a long-term key, answers your problems in energy security. And some countries have more balanced energy mix than others. Romania is a fine example, which Romania, if you look at the energy mix and you observe the energy consumption over the years, you'll realize that this is the country which has the less variations and a more easy approach to energy. And I hope Professor Purica will expand on that. And then we have the security of supply and demand and the differentiation of supply sources. Energy dependence, you see here in a very clear way how we present this. Again, variations from countries to countries. Some countries are totally dependent, like Cyprus. It's an energy island. It's an island and also an energy island. Other countries like Greece. Greece, for example, now is 81% energy dependent. It's even higher than the figures seen here. But other countries like Romania are a lot less. Croatia, also, which produces quite a lot of its own energy, is less. Albania, thanks to its big hydroelectricity potential, is certainly less. So there are a lot of variations, and for very good reasons, of the energy dependence. But overall, the region is quite a lot energy dependent. So energy dependence, how to lessen this, is going to be a permanent sort of goal, a target for governments and the region to achieve over the years. Energy security. Security in terms of transportation, we have oil and gas, smooth supply of electricity, effective protection of energy infrastructure. This is becoming very important in terms of physical hazards like hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, cyber threats, and of course, organized terrorist threats. So these were not there a few years ago, apart from the physical hazards. Now we have more hazards. So the question of security and cybersecurity especially is now becoming an issue in the region, and this is something that governments and companies in particular will be looking at more closely. The expanded South Corridor. We start with the South Corridor, which started back in 2000. In the early 2000s, it was an idea by the European Union, and it progressed, and gradually we have an accumulation of pipelines, mainly gas pipelines, and also LNG terminals. And the idea is to provide a bridge between the Caspian, that was the original idea, between Caspian gas, to bring Caspian gas to Europe through Turkey, Greece, Albania, South Italy. And this over the years has now grown. Excuse me. Okay. And in this, we have added the various interconnectors like the IGB, like the one which is being planned between Greece and North Macedonia, the EastMed, which is under consideration and study, and of course the big pipelines, the South Caucasus pipeline, which becomes TANAP and then TAP, Turkish Stream, and so forth, and all the various LNG terminals and plants, permanent land-based and floating ones, coming all together. So this gives you a very good picture of the energy plexus in the region in terms of gas infrastructure. There is a growing importance of LNG in Southeast Europe. As I said, we have 6 LNG importing terminals in operation, and we have another 4 in the planning implementation stage. So and here you see the LNG map of the region. And nuclear power is very important, very relevant, is back into the public discussion because of the EU taxonomy debate going on for the last few months. And the question is whether to include gas and nuclear in the taxonomy and hence secure more funding for gas and nuclear projects, because gas means 50% less CO2 and nuclear almost zero. So obviously this is something of considerable thought and analysis and cannot be clearly seen by some politicians. They need some extra help to be able to understand that. But there we are. It is an issue. It shouldn't be, but you know. And the region is advancing in that sense. We have more nuclear capacity in Romania by 2030, a lot in Turkey, and plans are also being discussed between Croatia and Slovenia. Power exchanges. We have 8 active power exchanges in Southeast Europe. We have market coupling. This is impacting the electricity price formation in the region, as you all know. And of course, at the same time, we have an influx of gas trading hubs. Some are more developed than others, but like the electricity market, now gas is following. It's less mature, but is maturing very quickly. And I think over the next few years, we'll see a lot more gas trading hubs operating in the region. And here is EFET's, the European Federation of Energy Traders annual scoreboard, how they are assessing the various gas hubs' performance. Energy demand and supply projections in Southeast Europe. We have divided this into 3 geographic areas. We used just one baseline scenario. We could not afford to examine more scenarios, but one baseline scenario. So we see what is going to be the situation by 2040. And we have 3 blocks. The one is the EU member states. The other one is the 6 Western Balkan countries, and the third one is Turkey. And having made this geographical division, we have developed the baseline scenario. So you see here, in terms of the EU member states, a very stable situation forecasted until 2040 in terms of demand, with small differentiations between the various energy types, with coal obviously getting less but not disappearing from the picture. On the other hand, we have more electricity and more gas and a lot more renewables. And then we have the West Balkan countries, where we see an increase in terms of demand, because this reflects the economic situation and the expansion, the anticipated expansion of the economies of the various countries as we go ahead. So again, we see that coal is not disappearing. On the contrary, it's increasing slightly. We see a lot more renewables, and oil remains more or less the same. So oil again is not moving fast out of the picture. And we see more gas, not dramatic increase, but a lot more gas. And then we go to Turkey, which is backed by very strong demographics. So we see an almost doubling of the consumption. I would say definitely another one third up. And again, very strong renewables coming into the picture. Oil products more or less remain the same, more gas, and more coal. But yet again, Turkey has to satisfy very fast increasing demand. Its economy, despite its recent latest problems, is developing, and this is the important thing to keep in mind. And finally, we conclude with the investment prospects of the energy sector in the region. And the important thing to remember is, compared to 2017, when we did our last analysis, our projections now 10 years ahead to 2031, and we have 50% more interest and commitments for investments in all sorts of energy projects than in 2017. So over the last 5 years, interest and commitments for projects have increased by 50%. This is what the numbers are telling us. So if we include Hungary and Israel, we're coming up with 436 billion for 2030. The estimated investment in 2017 was 234, minus 2 countries. But even if you take the other 2 countries, Hungary and Israel, out from the 2021 estimate, even then we are 50% higher than 2017. So it means that the region is attracting interest, it is attracting investment, and it's investment not focusing in one area like renewables or gas. It is spread in all different areas. Obviously, it is not attracting as much investment in coal. It is more focused on renewables, on gas, on pipelines, on electricity grids. And funding and finance until now has not been a problem. From now on, we don't know, because many economists and analysts argue that we are heading towards an economic recession. So what will happen is very difficult to foresee, to foretell, but the funding of projects in a region can be guaranteed through a number of organizations like the European Commission, EBRD, EIB, World Bank, German government, KfW, and even the local bank here, the Black Sea Development Bank, where they have a presentation tomorrow. Key messages. I will not repeat what I have already said. Just to reiterate, energy security, supply, trying to obtain oil and gas supply is going to become more difficult from now on. The push towards renewables is going to be challenging because this has to be accompanied with electricity grid expansion and storage. And if this doesn't come, then even if you add more renewables, you cannot get the output from them into your system. Market functioning is definitely a big challenge, because we see now that we are facing a lot of high prices in electricity and gas. A lot of the electricity prices are determined from high gas prices. People are beginning to wonder whether the models, that is the target model, are right or not. Do they need to be changed? This is going to be a very strong debate over the next few months. And of course, it is going to affect Southeast Europe. Electric vehicles, yes, it is an alternative. They are coming into the market, but many people do not realize that they will need to get electricity from somewhere. Therefore, electricity needs are going to be higher on account of increased penetration of electric vehicles. And the study was made possible because we were lucky to have the support of a number of companies, which you see here, not only from Greece, but also from Turkey and Bulgaria. And I'm happy to say that it is the first time that we managed to bring various countries into this very exclusive group of companies who have helped us realize this study. So I wish to thank them from this floor. And unfortunately, I understand that the minister is not able to connect somehow. Let's hope that he will be later today or even tomorrow morning, okay? So I'll now give the floor over to John, unless you have some questions, immediate questions on what I've been saying all this time. I mean, introduction and this. If there are any questions on that, I will be happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I will give the floor to John, who is far more capable than I am to carry on this session.
Hello. I'll introduce myself and say I'm John Roberts, and then I'll say the most important thing. Kostis, thank you very much. Thank you very much for organising this, and to all the sponsors for helping to arrange this and to make this feasible. It is a sheer delight to be able to do things, to a degree at least, live. Most of the presentations that we have coming up are going to be online. I'm therefore going to suggest that instead of moving over to the seat and forcing Mr. Goldin to sit in splendid isolation, if he wishes to stay in his seat, I'll summon him when it's the right time. I'm not quite sure how we're going to work with the online connections, and I will also follow the example of Costas, that if by any chance at any point I get a message from the back saying that the minister is online, then of course we will cut into the minister immediately. Right now, if everything is going well, we should have Tim Yeo of the New Nuclear Watch online. Yes, Tim, it's good to see you. I'm not going to bother to introduce people. It's complicated enough with the online. Tim, you've been doing this for a long time. You've been a great friend of IENE. So many thanks for coming online now, and I hope you're well. And will you start your presentation?
Thank you very much, John, and I'm delighted to be with you. I apologise for the fact that I'm not there in person, which I had wished. But the travel uncertainty at the moment, I've had very bad experiences in the last 2 weeks in flying back to the UK, so I'm afraid I'm in London. Can I echo your thanks to Costas for his usual masterly presentation, a vast amount of information, which is a lot to absorb, and I will study it again later after this conference is over. Today, as we all know, Europe and Southeast Europe in particular face two very serious and very urgent energy challenges. Firstly, the immediate challenge of how to strengthen energy security for all our countries while eliminating the use of Russian gas and oil. Secondly, the medium-term but equally important challenge of transitioning to net zero. That transition, in my view, just to respond to one of the points raised by Costas, that transition, in my view, is needed to prevent climate change from becoming irreversible and from actually threatening the survival of the human species. On the first challenge, there's no quick, easy, or cheap way to strengthen any country's energy security. The invasion of Ukraine brought matters to a head, but the origins of the current energy security crisis go back 2 decades. During this century, too many countries have neglected to make their supply of energy secure. They've been content to rely on imported energy because it was easy and it was cheap. And that position got worse when Germany decided, for political reasons, not on the basis of its energy needs, to shut down its nuclear plants. This weakened energy security, it increased carbon emissions, and it raised prices. So, to strengthen energy security now, as has been said, more investment is needed in storage, in energy efficiency, and in renewable energy. But on their own, renewables aren't the complete answer. No country can rely entirely on intermittent sources of electricity. In the last quarter of 2021, lower than usual wind speeds forced some utility companies to switch to costly natural gas, and this caused a spike in prices. Some power suppliers who hadn't hedged sufficiently against this risk were forced to close. So, all that brings us to nuclear energy. Using nuclear improves energy security because the fuel used by nuclear reactors is available from a diverse range of suppliers. And furthermore, once a reactor is operational, its running costs are very low. So the price of electricity generated by nuclear isn't subject to sudden spikes. Of course, it's impossible to increase nuclear capacity overnight, and that makes it all the more important to start developing new plants now. The background is good. As Costas mentioned, the European Commission is belatedly accepting that nuclear is as safe as any other electricity generation technology and is actually safer than many of them. Nuclear has therefore been provisionally recognised as an activity covered by the EU taxonomy. Right now, a range of nuclear vendors around the world are ready to sell their technology in Southeastern Europe. And most of those vendors offer attractive finance terms to possible buyers. In the short term, it is also vital that existing nuclear plants continue operating as long as possible. The International Energy Agency says life extensions of existing nuclear reactors are the cheapest and quickest way to increase the supply of low carbon electricity. I'm glad that Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and other countries in Southeastern Europe are all likely to keep their existing nuclear plants open after conducting safety reviews. But improving energy security is only one reason for using nuclear power. Another is that nuclear is the only reliable source of large-scale, low-carbon baseload electricity. 7 months ago, COP26 recognized the need for carbon emissions to start falling by 2030, not mid-century, by 2030. But unfortunately, there's no sign that this will happen. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, warned recently that despite the progress made at COP26, and I quote from him, the main problem was not even properly addressed. The EU, to its credit, is a leader in tackling climate change. It set ambitious targets for emissions cuts, for phasing out coal, for switching to electric vehicles. And the EU emissions trading system is the world's largest, most advanced, and most liquid carbon market. The European Commission has also courageously proposed carbon border tax adjustments to prevent carbon leakage from occurring and to block imports from countries which don't meet EU standards. I have no doubt at all that global concern about climate change and support for all these measures will be very much greater in 2030 than it is today. The need to switch to low carbon economies all around the world will be even more urgent. And that switch involves cost, but the cost is lower if the action starts now rather than later. And the disruption caused by that switch will be less if it doesn't have to be completed in a rush. Historically, only 2 countries, France and Sweden, ever cut carbon emissions as fast as the whole world must now do. In the 10 years after 1979, France's emissions fell by 29% and Sweden's by 37%. And both those unprecedented reductions were achieved by huge investment in nuclear energy after the Middle Eastern oil crisis. Today, nuclear currently supplies only a small part of the energy used in Southeastern Europe. So for security reasons, for economic reasons, for climate reasons, and for strategic reasons, I urge a big increase in the use of nuclear power. Thank you. I was asked to keep this to 6 minutes. I hope I achieved that.
I think under the circumstances, Tim, you have done extraordinarily well to compress that amount of information into the time available, which means we have time for questions. Now, do we have any questions for Tim? Well, the question I'll pose to you is almost as devil's advocate, which is, what do you make of social concerns about nuclear power and the fact that whether or not the EU rules or determines that nuclear is as safe as anything else, that is not necessarily how people feel about it?
I absolutely accept what you say, and it is essential in my view that any proposal for a new nuclear reactor should carry the support of the local community. It would be wrong to impose, just as wrong to impose a coal-fired power station against the wishes of the local community. What we have to do, I think, those of us who are advocates of more investment in nuclear, we have to make the case more clearly, more simply, and more convincingly. In my experience, going back many, many years, what I've noticed, it's certainly in the UK, but I think in many other countries as well, the more people know about nuclear power, the more likely they are to be supportive. They were certainly more likely to accept it, but many of them will become actually active supporters. They know that an operating nuclear power station is no threat to the local environment. It's a very clean type of plant to have in the local community. It provides very well-paid jobs and secure jobs, and it tends to be regarded as a good neighbour. Now, that is not, of course, the general perception. So there's a big educational job to be done. And it's down to people like me to make that case stronger. But I do accept that we've got to do that. We can't expect countries to be able to impose on any community a nuclear power station against that community's will. And we also, I think, we need to be mindful of the disruption to jobs in the fossil fuel industry as well. The UK, as you know, had over 1 million people working in the coal industry until the 1960s. That's now fallen by 99%, and it's required massive intervention by government to provide retraining, alternative opportunities in those communities which previously relied on coal.
Tim, thank you very much. And with regard to safety and people's fears, I just sort of bear in mind that I come from a different political persuasion to Tim, but one of the really great accomplishments of the Labour government of 1997 was its immediate introduction of a 2 billion programme to pay the miners for the cost of ill health from coal mining. And I'm glad to see Tim nodding. I think we all thought that that was exactly the right thing to do, because coal mining is hell. So, with that horrible thought, Tim, can I thank you very much indeed, and hope that next year we'll be able to see you live. And I will now move on to our next speaker, if that's all right. Are you ready for the next speaker, who is Mr. Apostolos Petropoulos, who is the energy modeler for the World Energy Outlook team at the IEA in Paris. So, Mr. Petropoulos, if you're here.
Hello, everyone. Many thanks for the invitation.
Excellent. Good to see you, Apostolos. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks to you. So I have a couple of slides. I can share it quickly. So here we are. So my presentation will focus mainly about EV's trajectory. Plus, I will talk a little bit about the supply and the security of supply, mainly for minerals. So all of us, we are aware that last year there was a really big growth on EV sales. In 2021, they reached around of 6.6 million cars, and nearly 10% of the global car sales. Most of the expansion, it came from China, of course, and Europe. And the key driver for European market, the big penetration, it is the CO2 standards. Also, this year in 2022, we do expect a 75% growth that it took already place from January to March compared to last year. But what we see is that the phenomenon of EVs, it's really concentrated on China, Europe, and United States. In the remaining emerging economies, we are talking about for sure that it's quite low, it's less than 1%. And this is something that we need to keep a close eye there, and also to try to provide guidance and help on these countries in order to speed up on the electrification, especially for transportation sector. So now on this slide, you may see the different electromobility plans of different OEMs, and we have put it in a way of quantitative index there, and this is the figures that we talk about 2030 plans. So, for example, in Europe, there is quite ambitious targets from the car manufacturers about electrification. We are reaching around 80%. In China, there is a 60% share, and similarly, more or less in the United States. And the way that it goes, it really follows also what is happened already in terms of electrification for 2021. For example, in Europe, we reached close to 20% shares. This is the case for China, and the United States it's lagging a little bit behind. So this supports also an additional element about the recent vote from the EU Parliament for banning ICEs beyond 2035. Already in 2030, OEMs, they have declared quite optimistic targets for increasing their the EV shares there. And this year we expanded also the analysis for electric trucks. Just for you to know, there are around 40 private stakeholders that they have signed an agreement for reaching 30% zero emission vehicles targets for heavy trucks by 2030. And this is, again, in a quantitative way, the shares that we reach if we take into account all the different plans of truck makers. And once again, the shares are quite big there by 2030. But what we can say, especially for the case of trucks, it's not translated at all on the penetration of electric trucks in the markets where we see the current share is less than 1%. On both light duty vehicles and heavy trucks, what we would like to highlight here is that governments need to support the infrastructure. And it's really important in order to help the EVs adoption there. And my last slide, we focus once again about supply security. It's a different perspective that Mr. Stambolis put on the table. It's mainly about minerals. And then looking about EVs production, we see that China is over 50%. It's slightly higher than their production, than the shares they have on total global electric cars market. It means that they export also electric vehicles on the other countries. In terms of battery capacity, 3/4 is based in China. We're talking about a huge number there. And if we see between cathode and anode, which is the components of batteries, of course, we do see that once again, China, it takes the lion's share, but there is also a big component of Japan and Korea that they are advancing a lot on this aspect. In terms of material processing and the refined processes of minerals, once again, it's a China story. We see quite big shares on lithium, cobalt, and graphite. It's a little bit different case for nickel because it's mainly refined where it is extracted there. Just to add that the Russian share of nickel is quite high. It reaches 20% in terms of needed nickel for batteries. I'm talking about grade 1 batteries there. And then in terms of resources and mining, we see that it's a little bit concentrated. I would say, like, for example, Australia has quite high share on lithium. Indonesia on nickel and cobalt, it's really dominated from Congo. And for graphite, it's mainly China. And what we would like to highlight here also as an agency, this year we took a mandate in order to look closer the supply chain of EVs and also to deepen our analysis around raw materials there. And what we see in our reports and we would like to highlight is that it's really important that diversification to take place. And also governments have started looking more and more on this topic. Many thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Now, do we have any questions for Apostolos? Then I will ask one question, which is quite simply, are there any signs that the rest of the world is making the kind of investments that would challenge China's dominance in refining and processing of graphite, cobalt, and lithium?
What it takes place is mainly on the battery side manufacturing capacity. So we see a lot of plants in Europe and US, but it's mainly on the battery side. It's not so much on the raw material side. But what we see is that more governments, for example, in US and also EU, has started looking more and more about materials and the full supply security of the materials that are needed for batteries. It's ongoing in terms of raw material side, that it's more advanced in terms of battery capacity side.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been excellent to have you, and it's always good to have the IEA on board at this stage. And congratulations to Fatih Birol for all his work on trying to move us to net zero even in these difficult times. Our next speaker is Mr. Yurtgal Yaguldin, who is going to be coming up and is live. So if you'd like to come on up, we're ready now, and I will vacate. You can do it from here, yep. And I'll move over.
Thank you, John.
There you are.
Thank you very much, Chairman Stambolis, dear John, dear colleagues. I'm honored to speak here today. There are several topics, but because of the time limits, I will pick up some issues from renewable energy, from energy storage, and from low emission transportation systems, but I will be ready to answer your questions regarding nuclear and other topics mentioned here. Turkey is severely affected by the high energy prices, by Ukraine-Russia war, and by supply chain interruptions. All these industries supplying the customers worldwide are suffering in this regard. And when we see the primary energy mix, all three, so it's very popular to say trilemma. We have the trilemma also, natural gas, oil, and coal. We are dependent on Russia. Despite pandemic, the last year was a success year for the deployment of renewable energy. The installed capacity reached nearly 100,000 megawatt in Turkey. We had an additional 800 megawatt by hydropower in orange color. Natural gas continue to decrease its capacity. 3-4 consecutive years, it was minus 100 megawatt last year. Coal is flat. And but in lila color, we see that wind, solar, and geothermal are growing quite successfully. Even here, when we see geothermal only 63 megawatt, this is more than the whole investments realized in Europe in geothermal field. Biomass with additional 530 megawatt is also a quite good improvement. So we are doing something in this regard to achieve net zero in 2053. Last year also the new feed-in tariff has been announced in Turkey. We see the figures here, especially look at solar. On the right side we see the former top cap figures, ceiling figures of the feed-in tariff, and now next to it of the new tariff. So by solar, it's not nearly 1/4 of the former ceiling price. Also, the others are substantially lower. The big issue we did not touch very much in Europe is how to reduce the emissions of the road transport. I'm thankful that ENA is addressing this issue the last years, and we could naturally use more CNG, and say one municipality in Ankara municipality is operating 1,300 CNG buses since 2007, and several others are also operating fleets in Turkey. We don't have even not a trial of hydrogen bus yet in our country, but we did quite successful investments in rail-bound transport, and let's see how the promotion of electromobility develops. So the electrification of railroads worked well, and the electrified railroads reached 6,000 kilometers. In the meantime, the high-speed train network reached beginning of next year, this year, 1,300 kilometers. You see in green this network, and the yellow lines are under construction. So it attracts the passengers. In the past, when you see a line where only 10% were using railway, and now over 90% of the passengers are attracted to the high-speed railway. This similarly also with the electrification, and the freight transport is growing quite fast. Also, in the 80s, it was quite unpopular to invest in underground, in subway. I remember the quite successful mayor, Bedrettin Dalan, was saying, I don't need subway investment. My electorals will not see it, what I do under the earth. So now it's more sexy. All the mayors are competing with it. In this regard, Istanbul is leading, and with 171 kilometers under construction, they are record holder in Europe. China is widely using electrobuses for public transport, and over 90% of all electrobuses in the world are operating in China. And now India is coming. They just announced a tender a few days ago for 50,000 electrobuses to be ordered for municipal transport. In Turkey, Manisa municipality and Izmir, they have since 5 years their electrobus fleet. Some 6-7 other municipalities just trial operation, 1-2 buses and so on. In Southeast Europe, if I'm not wrong, Romania is leading in electrobuses by municipal transport, in urban transport. And I hear also news from Greece that Athens is planning to have 220 electrobuses quite soon, and Thessaloniki is planning to have about 100 buses. In Turkey, 6 companies are producing electrobus models. They are widely used in Europe. And Karsan, the small model of Karsan called Electrojest, is the market leader in Europe since 2 consecutive years. The government forecasts to have up to 1 million electrocars on the streets in Turkey. And in this regard, the Ford finished the first phase of its investment in all electrical commercial vehicles in its Kocaeli factory in April this year, and started to deliver vehicles. The Turkish all-electric car TOG is expected to roll out next year. But there are still no incentives. So I admire the Greek incentive system now offering a lot of financial support for the interested customers to buy an electric car. But I'm quite sure that next year there will be some announcement in this regard also from the Turkish government. But the important is for the deployment of the electric cars and acceptance of electric cars is the charging network. And in all Europe, there are problems in this regard. This year, finally, the regulator published new legislation in April, and they offer 75% non-refundable funding to investors of charging stations for electro vehicles to make it more sweet. They say it can be combined with renewable energy generation and storage. And most important is, I think, that the regulator says they will implement a platform offering all the information for the drivers. So location of the network, availability, prices, and to possibility to make reservations for charging before you arrive at the at the station. This is a problem still in many countries. There are several suppliers, and you need to become a member at a one supplier chain, and you have only access to their platform. If there is such a platform where you can have all the information from different companies, it's could be very helpful. So batteries are needed, as we heard also before, for both for renewable energy integration and for electromobility. Regulation on the energy storage has been published in Turkey last year, and even the licensing started. There are 3 types of storage licenses: energy storage integrated with generation, storage integrated with consumption, so distribution companies and so on investing in this regard, and standalone energy storage. The first type attracted a lot investors. They are already investing in renewable energy, and they saw the benefits of this type of investment. There are ongoing projects combined, integrated with renewable energy investment in implementation. One company called Progressiva is investing in a standalone storage in Eastern Thrace region, and but you need also the batteries for it. In this regard, Yiğitaku was the first in the market, producing since 2013 lithium iron phosphate batteries in Ankara. Now this year, another company, Aspilsan, started with its trial production 1 month ago. Another company, Pomega, is erecting a lithium battery cell factory west of Ankara. And on the other side, the electro car developer TOG formed a joint venture with Chinese Farasis. They are investing in a lithium battery plant near their car factory. And Ford Motors formed a joint venture with Koç Holding and SK On from Korea. They are planning a $2.8 billion battery plant by Ankara. This is all I have chosen for you, but I will be happy to answer your questions.
Do you have any questions? One very quick question. Is there any sign that the emphasis on public transport, such as underground metro systems, is reducing demand for cars of all kinds in major cities?
Yes. So it affects a lot. The people are leaving their cars usually when they travel to work and other issues, and only when they have to travel abroad or nearby cities and so on, they try to use the car. Naturally, always high energy prices are helpful. If you sell gasoline like water, then nobody would care.
Yeah.
But high energy price helping in this regard now. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Shall I sit here or?
No, you can go and sit down.
Thank
It's
you.
fine. My thanks very much to Gildin. Can I have we got Andrei here? Yes, we do. We have Andrei Konoplyannik, whom I have known for many years, who has been very helpful. And at this very difficult time, it is still very important to have a Russian perspective. So Andrei, thank you for coming here, virtually. And the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for invitation. I hope my presentation can be seen at the screen. Yes, here it is. Yes,
Yes,
thank
it
you
can.
so much. Yes. So since I have very limited time for my presentation, thanks to the generosity of the moderator, I will go immediately to the point. I will switch on my timer. You see the title of my speech. So I will put aside the debate on who, when, and where has started the war in Ukraine, which is used now as an argument by a coalition of United States and European Union against Russia and Russian energy. It was formalized on the 25th March when Joe Biden and Ursula von der Leyen announced task force to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels. It formally aims to ensure energy security for Ukraine. One of two primary goals is diversifying LNG supplies, and Mr. Stambulis was speaking about this sort of diversification. As stated, the United States will work with international partners and strive to ensure additional LNG volumes for the European Union market of at least 15 BCM in 2022, with expected increases going forward. International Energy Agency 10 points plan of 3rd March speaks about 20 BCM. This is increase of LNG imports to the European Union in 2022. REPower European Union plan as of 8th March and updated version of 18th May about LNG diversification of 50 BCM by end 2022. How will this LNG best enter Europe to substitute Russian gas supplies? Since LNG comes at the coastline and Russian delivery points are in the mid-continent. What consequences will this have? Who will benefit and who will lose? That is the topic and the point of my presentation. Oops. Unfortunately. Yes. Russia has been developing for long a radial ring system of its gas supplies to Europe by adding 2 semi-rings to its historical gas transit corridors to Europe. But we didn't finish it in full due to blockade of Nord Stream 2. So I will speak about disruptive ring of global LNG supplies to Europe. This is the left ring at this slide. Europe for LNG, including for US LNG, is a bridge market within global price arbitrage deals. But it is a target market from my view for US LNG in East Europe. The aim is twofold: to kill 2 competitors. And that is my personal view. And you saw the disclaimer at the first slide, and it will be presented in the final slide as well. So first, to kill the competitor number 1, which means Russian gas in Europe, by cutting it off European Union, by putting security of supplies issues on top of the political agenda. This means the price of responding measures does not matter. Plus point number 2, to kill the competitor number 2, which means, and that is important, to diminish global European competitiveness beyond energy by substituting more cheap Russian pipeline gas by more costly freedom molecules of US LNG at the burning tip in the European Union. This will increase energy costs of European manufacturing goods and will diminish its global competitiveness while providing market for US LNG and thus supporting US domestic industries. For US LNG to be in the money in Europe, there should be no Russian gas there with its lower cutoff and user prices at the burner tip. This is why cutoff of Russian gas from Europe is vitally needed for US LNG to be in Europe. This is why 10 points of IEA starts with no prolongation of Gazprom's contracts expiring in 2022, approximately 15 BCM. This is why REPower European Union starts with LNG diversification equal to 50 BCM before end 2022. This is why first countries to refuse to switch to new payment procedure for Russian pipeline gas, I will come to it in the end, were Poland and Bulgaria, with their state companies who received corresponding orders from their governments, prohibiting them to switch to updated procedure. Poland and Bulgaria are the entry points for US LNG into Eastern Europe. They would like to be the dispatching centers for non-Russian gas flows to the European Union from the northeast and southeast. Their long-term contracts with Gazprom were to expire at end 2022. So they just cut off their purchase obligations few months in advance contract expiration date, thus surpassing point 1 of the International Energy Agency plan. This is why the story of Sakhranovka, here it is, of 11th May, when Ukraine refused to accept Gazprom's request for transit capacity at this entry point, thus cutting transit volumes through Ukrainian corridor by about 1/3. This is why the story with Canada refusal a few days ago to allow Siemens to return repaired gas turbine to Portovaya compressor station, which is entry point of Nord Stream 1. Expanded sanctions, by the way, were introduced by Canada already after this turbine arrived in Canada for repair. And this is why finally the whole story with Nord Stream 2 and Opal, etc., etc. So to substitute Russian gas, regasified LNG should have to go to European mid-continent, where delivery points of Russian gas are located. And it shall go there from the coastline through the west-east or north-south or southeast pipeline infrastructure. But such infrastructure mostly does not exist, which I showed by the red arrows at this figure. So US LNG aims to enter European Union from the east through Eastern Europe via LNG regasification terminals at the Baltic Sea, Poland, Svinoujstia and Gdańsk, Lithuania, Klaipėda, in Aegean Sea, in Revituda and Alexandroupolis in Greece, in Marmara Sea in Turkey, in Adriatic Sea at Kirk, and another pipeline and another regas, LNG regas capacities that were mentioned in Professor Stambuli's presentations. Total amount capacities of these regas facilities that I mentioned is about 25-30 BCM. Then regasified LNG would go to the south and to the north in direction to underground gas storages of West Ukraine. Total capacity of 5 underground gas storages there about 25 BCM. And this is marked by yellow arrows at this picture. This philosophy has been supported by Ukraine and is well illustrated by the chart from presentation of high professional Sergei Makagon, CEO of Gas2So of Ukraine. Since 2017, Ukrainian underground gas storages operates in the legal regime of customs warehouse. They have physical reserve flow capacities which are established at the west borders of Ukraine. This enables to use West Ukrainian underground gas storages to influence state of the market in Baumgarten, a Central European gas hub. And it is vitally important for regasified US LNG to receive access to underground gas storages of West Ukraine, since this will help to compensate this correct character of LNG deliveries in the north and in the south. And here is the most important point. If and when regasified US LNG through yet to be fully developed north-south corridor within East Europe reaches Ukrainian gas transit corridor, it can use available capacities of this corridor in westbound direction from Western Ukraine underground gas storages. So this is the plan, as I can see it, of how US LNG can enter European Union to substitute Russian gas from the east of European Union. Institutional instrument for development of North-South gas infrastructure corridor in Eastern Europe is the 3Seas initiative. It was established in 2016 by 12 East European states with strong ongoing support of the United States. In a few days in Riga, the members of the initiative will discuss observer status of Ukraine in this initiative. Ukrainian underground gas storages are vitally needed for 3Seas, since any gas infrastructure corridor without underground gas storages as a compensatory mechanism for gas flows has very little value. This initiative is de facto a successor of the similar plan of Intermarium, presented a century ago by Marshal Pilsudski. Now, this initiative is adapted to gas, but with the same aim, which is well explained by George Friedman, who is the founder and the president of private intelligence agency Stratfor. And you can see the citation from him here at the bottom of this slide. So the real aim of the United States is to weaken Europe in global competition in favor of its close political ally, the US itself. Energy cooperation between Russia and the European Union, on contrast, with its cheaper energy supplies compared to alternative options, has been beneficial for the European Union since has led to increase of welfare of European Union citizens. So it is good to consider once again which cooperation is for real benefit of the European Union. And finally, a few words about new payment scheme for Russian gas. New procedure provides two safety counters for both seller and buyer of Russian gas, as it mentioned at this slide. It aims to protect against repetition of the negative precedent when 300 billion of US dollars of Russian international liquidity reserves were frozen by Western states. I will not use the word stolen or expropriated. Any sovereign state has the right to regulate. Russian state used this right and ordered its state-controlled company Gazprom how to diminish currency risks created by this negative precedent for both sides of the contract. This mechanism became legally binding by presidential order number 172 as of 31st March. Some European states have also used their right to regulate in response to this Russia's action. Among 54 companies, buyers of Russian pipeline gas, according to Alexander Novak, Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, only 6 companies from 5 so-called unfriendly states have refused to move to new payment scheme. All 5 companies from these 5 states, Pignik from Poland, Bulgargas from Bulgaria, Gazium from Finland, Ørsted from Denmark, Gaztera from the Netherlands, are state-owned or state-controlled companies. So these were purely politically motivated decisions aimed at deliberate result by order number 172, cancellation of supplies. Earlier, European Commission has multiply used this right to regulate against Gazprom. I would mention only 2 episodes. In 2003, it required to exclude destination clauses from all Gazprom contracts with European Union companies. In 2012, it required to adapt pricing formulas in Gazprom's contracts in Central and East Europe from oil indexation to hub indexation. And the final conclusion. Finally, I do very much hope, I'm always confident that European Union and Russia will return in the post-war future to their mutually beneficial energy cooperation, though in new reality and new normality, in the mutual interests of the citizens of the two. We are too much interdependent and interlinked by the cross-border, capital-intensive, immobile, joint energy infrastructure. Joint US and European Union intention to nullify Russian energy supplies to the European Union makes no good, especially for the European Union. It serves in the benefit of the United States only. Thank you for your attention. Few episodes in more details you can find in these references which were published in English in Natural Gas World. Thanks once again for your attention, and please pay attention to the disclaimer that I put here on the slide. Thank you.
Andre, thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes, we've got one question over there. Could you, Slavo? Say it out now, repeat it.
Yeah, the question is, today in the Bulgarian media there was news that today there was a development concerning the relations between Russia on the one side and Germany, Italy and Austria on the other, in the sense that there was a cut of the gas deliveries notification. So can Mr. Konopianik elaborate a little bit on that?
Andre, I think what they're asking is, what's being asked is, it relates to Gazprom's decision that it's going to reduce the deliveries to Germany and Italy because I think it's doing some technical work on delivery plans, or at least that's what it says. But the result has been a very substantial fall in actual deliveries. Can you explain this?
I will, if I may, I will very shortly comment on this. Regarding Italy, I do know that there was a decrease by 15%. And as you know, Gazprom, in his public statements, didn't provide explanation and the reasoning for this. So it will be improper for me to go, let me say, beyond the company with these explanations. But I can provide explanations for diminishing of throughput through the Nord Stream 1, which takes place in 2 steps. I have explained shortly in my presentation that in February, the turbine, which was produced by Siemens in its Canadian factory, was sent there for repairment. And after that, after the turbine was already there, Canada has expanded extensions, which covered now the services, including this one that referred to repairment of the turbines. Sorry, I am not the supporter of the espionage theories, but I'm very much concerned that maybe Canada was not, let me say, fully independent in taking, let me say, this particular decision on the extension of the sanctions. But this means that Siemens told Gazprom that it is unable to send the repaired turbine to Russia, back to Russia, not because of an intention of Siemens, but because Canada has prohibited it because there are sanctions. Now, the
Andrei, I
governments
think
of
we're going to have
Germany...
to wrap up because we've got one more speaker to get in.
Okay, that's fine. So I see this, unfortunately, that's the result of sanctions. And that's why these sanctions are prohibitive not only for Russia and for Gazprom. They are prohibited, first of all, for European Union itself. That's what I was trying to send as a message in my presentation. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and for the opportunity for me to speak about the friends once more time. And I hope to see you soon in person at one of the next events. Thank you.
Exactly. This is the whole point, to try to get other points of view. Thank you very much indeed. Our final speaker is Evgenia Guzilov, coming from Romania, and I'm hoping that she's going to be online now. Gina, are you there? Gina, it's very good to see you. I'm just going to say hello, thank you for coming, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. It's great to see you too. And of course, a big thank you to Kostis Stambolis for the opportunity to be part of the Energy Dialogue this year. Since I'm the last speaker, I would not want to abuse the patience of the audience, and I will just share some thoughts briefly, trying not to repeat what has been said before. But I would just like to say that we are all in the energy market right now in a watershed moment. So this is truly, this is not something small. This is not something, this is a unique, big disruptive moment in the European energy market. What we see is that relationships that have been forged and built and in place for decades are now being broken, undone, and the whole, let's say, energy architecture of the European continent is being reconfigured, rewired. And this is partially because energy and economics is paying the price for what is happening in politics and for foreign policy mistakes. The ripples from all this are multiple, and they are unfolding on multiple fronts. So we have high energy prices. We already had a very difficult situation before the aggression of Ukraine. So we had a crisis in the natural gas market, which spilled over into the electricity markets. So prices spiked up in electricity even before the invasion. And now we're also looking at what potentially could be a crisis in the oil prices, because we are seeing that the prices jumped at the pump. They have increased significantly in the US, but also in Europe, in Romania. So we see all these crises converging, and this leads to inflation, and this leads to rising cost of living, and this essentially hurts all of us. It hurts the producers, but it hurts the consumers. So our pockets are directly hit by all this. However, and the whole discussion that ensues from this, that we need to decouple from Russian coal, Russian gas, Russian oil, and I would like just to say that this is not something that's pleasant for us. On the contrary, it's incredibly difficult, tough. It's a huge headache for us. But why are we doing this? It's not because the United States says that we do this. It's because many countries in Europe fundamentally disagree with Russia's actions in Ukraine, and they want to send a strong signal that we want, these actions in Ukraine to stop, and we're willing, even if it's tremendously, difficult for us, to pay a certain price, each and every one of us, from our own pockets, so to speak. Now, I will not dwell a lot on the side of the LNG, but I would just like to say that with respect to replacing the Russian volumes that are being taken out of the European gas market with LNG, we can be successful up to a point, and it's conditional on several other factors. For instance, I think that Europe so far has been somewhat lucky in April and in May that these free LNG molecules that are not caught up in long-term contracts, that are not committed, they were available to come to Europe, in the sense that we were not competing with China during these months because China was in lockdown, they had a slower economic activity. But it's not a given that things will continue in such a lucky vein for Europe in the next months. So there's this uncertainty. What else I would like to say, in order not to dwell only on this, let's say, negative side and incredibly difficult time for all of the stakeholders on the European market, but I would say that the key word of the markets, pressure, tighter markets and incredible pressure on the consumers and on the consuming states. In all this, and this will be maybe my third point and last point, is that I would like to not dwell on this gloom and doom, but to give the audience maybe a small piece of good news from Romania. Small news, giving the context in which we're going through all, but it's an important step ahead for Romania. So I could not say anything about the breaking news that we are having for 2 days, because it started yesterday. We in Romania have seen the start of the production from the gas field Amendoina, which belong to Black Sea Oil and Gas, so in the Romanian Black Sea side, but it's the shallow water. So we have seen finally the start of gas production there. And sure, this is not a huge volume, it's a marginal, it will not make a big difference in the sense that we will still need gas imports. But it's a small step forward for Romania, and sure, it would have been better for this to happen sooner. But even the fact that it happened now, it's good news. Even though it took more years since the discoveries, in the first discovery in 2007, so almost 15 years for us to see this first gas from these two gas fields in the Romanian Black Sea. But it's something to give us hope for. Sure, as you know, I have always been critical of Romania's slow movements on the upstream front. And I hope that this development will speed up maybe the other projects that Romania could develop in the, let's say, medium term. John, I think I'll stop here, so as to give maybe room for more interactions.
The only question I was going to ask is again, how far do you think Romania is going to go, having got BSOG online? Are we going to see some development with Neptune?
Well, we sure hope so. But even if this project will receive the green light, given the pace of how Romania has moved so far on developing these projects, I do not think that it can make a significant difference in the next 3-4 years. So probably, starting from 2027, maybe. And I'm thinking by comparison that, and it's painful for me to acknowledge that my country is moving so slow on this front. When I look at Egypt and how fast they put the Zohr gas field in the Mediterranean into development in just 3 years. I'm looking at Turkey, who made this discovery in August 2020, and they want to start production by the end of this year. So again, countries that are moving very fast, but this is not, unfortunately, the case of my country.
You're absolutely right on that, looking at the speed that Turkey is moving with Sakarya. Gina, thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute delight. That's the end of this panel. I think there's going to be a 3-minute break now to get ready for the next panel. But I just want to thank everybody who's taken part in this one, and to thank the technicians for managing to get through it, the blended system of online and live. So thank you to everybody. And now a 3-minute break.